Today's world is different for our children, vastly different from the one we grew up in. The technologies we take for granted or simply don't understand have become an integral part of our children's identities. These technologies saturate practically every aspect of their daily lives. This digital bombardment is shaping who they are and who they will become. We must realize they live in a different world and speak a different language. If we ever want to take part in nurturing those who will be the architects of our future, it's up to us to learn that language and step into that world, to allow them to lead us in as much as we must lead them, so that we may truly understand the digital generation.
That because of digital bombardment, because of the pervasive nature of digital experiences today, that these children have become screen-agers. This is the first generation in Singapore history that has actually grown up with a mouse in their hands, combined with an assumption that images on a screen are supposed to be manipulated and interacted with, that screens aren't just for passive viewing and consumption. These children have become, as Mark Prensky describes in his writing, digital natives who have grown up in the new digital landscape. And as a result of that, digital is their language of choice. You see, these kids are DFL. They speak digital as a first language. It is their native language. They were born into it. You see, the problem is that people of our generation and of our parents' generations are not digital natives. We don't speak digital as a first language. Do you understand that we are digital immigrants? We're immigrants because we come from another country. We come from a non-digital world. We come from a time and a place before digital technology, and as a result of that, many of us have old country traditions and assumptions about how the world works. You see, here's the problem. While these children are DFL, we speak DSL. We speak digital as a second language. And this is a very important distinction, and the reason is because absolutely new research is telling us that because of this digital bombardment, because of the new digital landscape, that the brains of the digital generation have been affected, that the brains of the digital generation have changed both physically and chemically, and that as a result of this, that our children are actually neurologically wired differently than we are. And even though we don't yet fully understand the incredibly complex processes involved in thinking and learning, I think it's really important during this presentation here today that we take a closer look at what we do know. And the first thing, as educators, you need to understand is that when we are born, we come into the world with about 50% of our brain wiring in place to handle the initial critical functions. And the other 50% of the wiring takes place after birth. And it's really important for me to tell you this because for the longest time, conventional thinking has been that by the age of 3, that the brain had become stable. That from that point forward, it didn't really change. That by the age of 3, we then had a fixed number of brain cells which then started to die off one by one with no appreciable new cell growth. And a result of that is that there was a long-standing assumption that by the age of 3, we all had fixed memory, we all had fixed mental processing power, we all had fixed intelligence, that basically you were stuck with what you were born with. And by the way, this was believed to be the case for all brains regardless of race, regardless of culture, regardless of experience, that we all use the same. Here they are right here, neural pathways or electronic circuitry. Let's take a closer look at them here, to process, to store, and use information. However, in the past few years, almost all of those beliefs have been shown to be completely wrong. They've been able to use new scanning technologies that have been able to demonstrate that, on the contrary to our long-standing assumptions, that the brain is actually highly adaptive, it's highly malleable, and that our brains are constantly reorganizing themselves structurally throughout life based on two different factors. The first one is input and experience, and the second one is the intensity and the duration of those experiences. Now, this is very, very important, because what this means is that you actually can change memory capacity, you can change processing power, you can change neural circuitry, and here's the big one. As a result of that the intelligence you're born with isn't fixed. Now, this ongoing process of reorganization and restructuring of the brain, where the neurons are constantly rearranging themselves, making new connections, and pruning unnecessary neurons to speed up and reroute the flow of thought. This is called, and this is a term you probably should learn, it's called neuroplasticity. What this means is that the brain is actually plastic, and so contrary to long-standing assumptions, the brain is actually making new connections and setting up new circuitry throughout our lives. And as a result of that, the mind is constantly creating and then recreating new thinking patterns. Now it's very important you understand that in the last 2 years, there have been a number of new books written on neuroplasticity in digital kids. And in the handout you'll be able to download from the MOE or from my website, I've included the number, but in particular, if I was king for a day, I would recommend that everyone in this room read a book by Steven Johnson called Everything Bad is Good for You. In this book, Johnson argues that the plots of today's video games, movies, television are challenging young viewers to think like grown-ups, to follow intricate narratives, and to analyze complex social networks. And as a result of this, what Johnson suggests is that these students of ours have become very sophisticated thinkers who, amongst other things, have learned to take risks without being reckless, or have learned to deal with failure, are confident, are motivated, and expect a lot of themselves in areas that they care about. As Johnson points out, though, the problem here is that while they are developing sophisticated and valuable thinking skills, these are skills that are not generally measured by the current school system or the test system that we use. Now, there's another related book by a fellow by the name of Daniel Pink. It's called A Whole New Mind. And Pink says that we have been raised that today we live in a linear, logical, left to right, top to bottom, beginning to end, left brain society. This left brain society is and has long been the mindset behind education. Pink says that the role of the right side of the brain, which predominantly handles things like pattern analysis, big picture thinking, intuition, and the like, has long been undervalued, long been underappreciated, long been misunderstood in our predominantly left brain society. But what Pink says is, do you understand that almost anything that involves predominantly left brain thinking is either going to be automated, it's going to be turned into software or hardware, or it's going to be outsourced? And as a result of that, if our children are going to survive, let alone thrive, in the culture of the 21st century, if our kids are not just going to be prepared for they're going to be prepared for their future, not our past, that we as educators need to help them learn how to use both hemispheres effectively to be able to use a whole new mind.